Welcome, everyone, to You're Gonna Need a Bigger Bottle.
Welcome.
That was a nice sing-song welcome, Scott.
Yeah, I got to put a little musicality into it sometimes,
It's true.
Jamie. You know, we don't have a lot of music on the show.
It's true.
In part because of costs and part because of the needs of the production, and it's a talky show. Bearing in mind we're on a tangent already, 10 words into the intro. Please continue.
Immediately. It's a podcast, everyone, about wine and movies.
It's a
or
podcast.
Movies and wine, depending on your perspective. And for those of you out there who don't know shit about one or the other, my name is Jamie. I'm the wine guy.
He's Jamie. He's the wine guy. He's sick, everybody. He's got some sniffles. So it'd be real nice to... Oh, don't put those on, Mike. I'm going to have to cut all these out. This is going to be a hard one. He's Jamie. He's got sniffles. I'm Scott. I don't have sniffles. And we are here to help. But you do have
an earache.
I have an ear thing. Don't talk about my medical things on the podcast. That's my business.
Fuck you, buddy.
We're here to help you. Each episode, we pair a movie that I love with a wine that he loves.
We tell you why we like them, how they're made, and why they work. Hopefully we find a pairing that works. Usually, we do not.
We rarely, if ever, do. Today, we start a new 6-part miniseries about wine. And I say that respectfully and with no addendum that Jamie wrote in here for my portion of the outline, which was rude. We start a new 6-part Jamie-led miniseries. Jamie,
yes,
what are we drinking today, and why are we drinking it?
So today we're starting a little mini-series about the curriculum of the Court of Master Sommeliers and some of the features and bugs as I see them in that curriculum. I'm sitting in May for the Master's Theory exam, and I thought we might go through some things so I can outline what's been valuable to me through this education and bitch about some of the stuff that bugs me.
Now, Jamie, this sounds extremely sexy and thrilling, this miniseries that you've described. Do you have like a really dry and uninteresting name for the miniseries so we can tamper people's expectations? Because the description you just gave, like, people are going to be way too amped up for this, and we got it. So what's the name for the miniseries? You got to have a brand.
The Court of Master Sommeliers curriculum miniseries.
All right, good. That feels appropriate to the level of interest that I at least am mustering so far. Please continue.
So a CMS tasting flight is typically 6 wines, 3 white and 3 red. It's tasting according to a rubric with a time limit of 25 minutes or 4 minutes and 10 seconds per wine. You're expected to hit a number of points along the way and arrive at a variety, a place, and a vintage for each wine. Today, we're starting our flight with Donnhoff Riesling Neiderhauser Klamm Kabinett from the Nahe in Germany. This is vintage 2020. It is available from Crush Wine Company. That's crushwineco.com for $27.99 plus tax and shipping. It is the least expensive bottle we'll be tasting this series.
How high are they going to get? How high are they going to get?
They get up to 36, I think. It's a pretty narrow window.
That's fairly narrow. I thought you were going to get wild.
No,
I thought you were really going to cut loose and do some pricey ass shit.
No. Although it's likely that I'll see a couple of very high priced bottles if I ever get to the tasting portion of this fucking exam.
Why wouldn't you get to the tasting portion of the exam?
So the thing that I'm taking in May is the theory exam. They separated them so you don't take them all at once. You take theory first, and if you pass theory, then you move on and take tasting and service together.
Huh. Did they do that for a good reason or for a bad reason?
Yeah, for a good reason. It makes sense to separate them. I don't know. It makes sense for most people. For me, it's a little, I don't love it. Because part of my success on the theory portion of the advanced exam was the pace and cadence of my tasting that I was doing and my ability to, during tastings, be always talking about the producers we were tasting, the places that they come from, the theoretical parts of those things, because I'm very much an auditory learner. Studying theory in a vacuum is a lot of reading and flashcards and that kind of thing, and I find it to be very difficult. That being said, separating them makes an amount of sense because you're not, rather than paying $2,500 for all 3 parts of the exam, and if you fail, you fail. This way, if you get past theory, you have that locked in. Whether or not you then go on to pass tasting and service, you have a couple of tries past that. And it also allows the organization that has a limited resource of examiners to examine more candidates.
All right. This sounds like a good reason, and it doesn't seem like it's really screwing anybody.
No.
That's great.
It just doesn't quite align with my study technique, but I'm not representative of the testing body here.
No. And, as we all know, that testing mechanisms and styles are appropriate for all people. And if your study methodology doesn't work, then you're screwed. And clearly you're not cut out
and clearly you're
to proceed in your
stupid.
education. That's right.
Yeah. Anyway, in the lead up to this miniseries, I told you that this wine was sharp, sweet, and mineral. So given those descriptors, Scott, what movie did you choose?
Well, Jamie, as we had discussed previously, those pairing words are very nice, and I discarded them immediately because I wanted to go along with your thematic arc for the thing. You're doing a thing about your education, and so to kind of have a parallel to the larger theme of your miniseries, I wanted to do something that was rooted in my education and the movie side of things in education. So for my half, we're sticking with film school classics. Sort of the iconic landmark, largely short films from the early 20th century that I studied and learned quite a bit about, and most of them discovered in film school many a moon ago. And that if you weren't a film school person, you probably have not seen or even heard of. So we're doing a lot of short, very old, some of them very strange motion pictures on my side of the miniseries. And we are starting out with the iconic, the groundbreaking 1902, A Trip to the Moon from the wizard and the legend, Georges Méliès.
Georges Méliès. That's a name that I definitely know off the top of my head.
Georges Méliès. Well, even just like 10 years after this movie's release, very few people remembered his name, and he was all but forgotten to the annals of history. It's one of those stories, Jamie. It's about like a great innovator and genius and technical and creative wizard who very nearly died destitute and forgotten by his peers and all who came after him.
We've done this before.
Very nearly. Very nearly.
Poor Jacques Tati.
Well, Jacques Tati, yeah. But so A Trip to the Moon, Georges Méliès' A Trip to the Moon is 121 years old and is in the public domain, and you can watch it any number of places. Jamie and I watched a colorized version, a beautifully restored colorized version that is currently streaming on HBOMax, but you can watch any number of black and white versions perfectly legally on YouTube. There's even a complete stream of it on Wikipedia, although it does not have any accompanying soundtrack. Although any version of this movie that you watch with a soundtrack is a completely original score that would have been recreated, because none of what was played alongside the movie is remembered now.
I was curious about that. I really enjoyed the music that went along with it.
Yeah, it's lovely. It's a new score. We watched a restoration. Well, we'll get to it. But in the meantime, I would like to open up this bottle of this here Riesling. We haven't done a Riesling in a spell, have we?
It's true. It's been a minute.
All right, so we're opening this. This is a stelvin closure.
Yep.
Riesling. I do love the stelvin, Jamie.
I like the stelvin too.
In the bottle, kind of stanky. A little musty.
Let it breathe. Let it out, man. Let it out. Pour it in the glass.
I'm going to, but I'm trying to experience every angle of the olfactory presentation of this wine.
All right. So I thought it might be interesting to listeners, if not to Scott, certainly not to Scott, for me to go through the method that I would use if I were blind tasting this wine, and hit all of the points along the way. Obviously, I know what this wine is. It's not an actual blind, so when I come to the final conclusion, we know what wine this is. But the rubric requires that you hit a number of points along the way. So Scott, with your permission, I'm gonna go through.
You do not have my permission.
Okay, well, I'm gonna do it anyway.
Well, hang on. I think it might be more fun if collectively we do your rubric, but it's you putting me through the paces.
Okay.
Hold my hand and stroke my hair and walk me through the experience. So obviously I'm not going to be able to guess what this shit is or where it came from. But like, let's go through it. All right. I've witnessed your blind tasting before. You used to make it like a little parlor game. And everybody had to bring over like a bottle of wine in a paper bag, and we all had to watch Jamie see if palate confirmed nose, but I've never done it. So take me through the paces, Jamie. I'm ready.
All right. So first thing you want to assess is visual sight. So you want to tip your glass down as much as you can against a white background so that you can really see what the color is. I've got a little piece of white paper in front of me. So would you say that this wine is clear, hazy, or turbid?
What is turbid? Is that
turbid,
opaque?
Like,
is that wine for opaque?
Not opaque, but like with particulate in it.
Well, I do not detect particulate. And I would say it's closer to clear than hazy.
Yeah.
Are we allowed a spectrum, or does it have to be one of those things?
You know, if it's somewhere between clear and hazy, you would note that. All
right. Well, I deem it to be fairly clear.
Yeah, I think that this is pretty crystal clear.
Excellent.
Now the concentration of color. Do you see? Are you detecting a lot of color here, or is there a pretty low concentration? Or is there somewhere in between?
It's like in between. It's a palish yellow.
Moderate concentration of color.
Moderate concentration of color.
Pale yellow.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's the next thing is like what color is it? Pale yellow, straw, golden, amber. And we'll get into what the red vocabulary would be like, but that's pretty much what it is for, and you already said it, pale yellow.
Pale yellow. Do you concur?
I concur. If I were saying it, I'd probably say pale straw.
Pale straw. And what is the straw is just like whiter or browner?
Straw is, whiter. Like less, a less concentrated yellow.
Okay. I almost had a sip. I didn't want to. I shouldn't get ahead.
Yeah, not quite.
There's a methodology. I don't want to fuck shit up. They're going to take my pin away.
So then, do you detect any presence of gas? Are there any bubbles?
No bubbles.
No bubbles.
Wait,
no
one bubble.
One bubble.
That may just be the result of me shaking it and kind of sloshing it a little bit.
Yeah. So
but there does not appear to be any carbonation station.
No gas, and is there any sediment?
Meaning chunkus?
Chunkus.
No chunkus.
No sediment. Okay. So then you move to the nose. On the nose. First thing you want to assess on the nose is intensity of aroma. Not what you're smelling, but can you smell it? Do you have to like bury your nose in the glass to smell it? Or can you smell it from like farther away?
All right, let me see. Definitely get it with my nose in the glass. Faintly with my nose not in the glass. Not at all from a few inches away.
So a moderate intensity of aroma.
Yes, I think.
That's what I would assess it at.
Moderate intensity of aroma.
Yes.
All right.
Although
I'm doing very well so far. Yeah,
my nose is fucked right now.
Your sinus situation is poor.
Yeah.
Your nose is poorly.
It's not good. Okay, so the next thing is clean or faulted. Is this wine corked? Is it heat damaged? Is there Brettanomyces or volatile acidity?
I don't know what heat damaged would smell like.
Heat damaged would smell like crazy overripe, like cooked fruit.
No, none of that. No BM smell, and I don't believe any corked aroma either.
and no like acetic, vinegary aroma.
No.
Okay.
Maybe like a scotch of that. I don't know. There's something. Nah, I guess vinegar is wrong. I'm probably just smelling the alcohol.
So
no vinegar.
The wine is clean. Next we assess age. Your first assessment of age. Is this wine presenting young or old? Is it the terminology would be youthful, developing, or vinous?
And this is a smell thing.
Yeah. So youthful
yes.
is like bright, fresh, ripe fruit, or underripe fruit. Developing is sort of incorporating some secondary and tertiary aromas like earthiness or nuttiness. And then vinous is very developed fruit and a lot of secondary and tertiary aromas that are like maybe meaty or earthy or herbal, savory, that kind of thing.
There's a little bit of an herbal thing. There's an herbaceousness, I feel like.
Bit, yeah. But pair that with and bear in mind that all of the descriptors that I gave you, not all of them, but many of them can be indicative of variety. But if those aromas are driving the bus, so to speak, in terms of aromatics, then you can make an assessment of age. And a lot of this is tasting experience, right? It's like, well, I've tasted a ton of old wine. Yeah, sure. Smelling experience. So I would say that this wine is presenting youthful, and we know that it is youthful.
Well, but that's cheating. That's cheating, Jamie. We can't just look at the label. This is not blind tasting if we can look at the label.
We're going through the rubric, Scott. We're not doing it blind. We both know what the fuck the wine is.
I have already forgotten what it is. But so aside from a little bit of the herbaceousness, yes, I'm getting scotches. No, it's mostly fruit.
Right.
It's lots of fruit driven.
Okay, so then that's the next thing. So youthful, and then offer an assessment of what is driving the aromatic profile of this wine, which you already said is fruit. I agree.
Fruit
This is
forward.
A fruit-driven wine. Next, assess the fruit. What types of fruit are you smelling, and what condition is it in?
And by condition, we mean ripe, underripe, stewed, cooked.
Correct. Baked,
rank,
underripe, yeah.
Rotted.
Rotten, mealy.
Well, as always with the white wines, I'm getting pineapple, getting a strong pineapple component. You just drank. Oh wait, no, you didn't drink some. Never mind. You're still just sniffing.
Correct.
Pineapple. I just sniffed some up my nose. Oh my God. Oh.
Safety tip, everyone. Do not aspirate the wine.
Is that would they just immediately send you packing if you did that during a tasting exam?
No, they would not.
If you just sucked some right up the old nostril?
I have a feeling they would like dock a point or two.
Yeah. There would definitely be some notes being written down very, very urgently. Oh boy, that doesn't feel good. I hope it didn't go back into the glass.
I hope it didn't get into your sinus cavity.
It is the right nostril too. That's where things are bad right now. All I have is pineapple. There's like a generally tropical situation, and I'm smelling smells that remind me of high acidity. Okay. And that's about all I got.
So if they're reminding you of high acidity, maybe that's on the underripe side of the spectrum, right? Maybe an underripe pineapple, as opposed, like certainly not a canned pineapple. Like pineapple in syrup, like a fresh one.
No, none of the syrup.
A thing that is helpful to remember is that basically every white wine has some aroma of apple.
Basically every one?
Yeah. And the reason for that is the dominant acid in white wine is malic acid. And malic acid is the acid of apples.
Yes, I detect
like a
the
Granny
odors
Smith.
Yeah, okay.
Like a tart apple. And I agree with you on the tropical bit too, which is an interesting dichotomy, and we're going to talk about maybe why that is, right? Tropical flavors tend to indicate warmer climate, extra ripe. But we're getting underripe tropical fruit here on this wine, along with that like apple component, and I would add like an underripe white peach to your description. Next, is there any mineral content here? Mineral or earth?
I don't believe I detect any earthiness. And maybe a scotch of minerality, like some kind of a fine, dusty stone situation. But only a hint, not dominant.
I get like a dusty limestone minerality, and for sure the fruit is dominant here. But the next thing, maybe not like the closest second place, would be that like dusty limestone.
Do you detect any earthen tones on the nose?
Nothing earthy. And it is important to say I don't detect any earth here because that's a thing on the rubric. You have to go through minerality,
you can't just not
earthiness.
Say it. You have
Correct.
to say that it's not there.
Yep.
Because by saying it's not there, it helps you whittle down what it could or could not be.
And it shows that you understand what you're looking for.
Right. Jamie, these CMS guys, they seem like they've got a good system worked out. I'm learning more in the last 10 minutes than I have learned in 2 years of doing this show.
Fuck you, buddy. So the next is, what other things do you smell? Do you smell things that are herbal, that are floral, that are like other non-fruit aromas?
Well, I already said a hint of herbaliness, although I couldn't tell you which herb it might be. It's not a basil. Maybe like a tomato leaf smell.
Something a little bit resiny.
Is the tomato leaf resiny?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I can be down with that.
I'm not detecting any saline types of aromatic notes, I don't think.
No, it's not salty. Any flowers?
No, I do not detect flowers. Do you detect flowers?
Like a very, very slight white flower. Like a gardenia.
I don't really smell a lot of flowers, so I couldn't say.
We've been over that. You should stop and smell the flowers.
I should smell some flowers. I know, Jamie. I should stop and smell some roses.
My office right now smells like flowers because Genevieve bought me flowers.
Genevieve bought you flowers. She's very thoughtful.
And I like having flowers around. It's nice. I've got white roses and carnations.
I enjoy plants. I just don't really have flowers. I have a peace lily in the bathroom, which is the only thing that we can keep alive in this house. And eventually I'm going to do the thing where you like split the roots and make 2 peace lilies. And then I don't know, maybe someday I'll have 4, but like anything else just dies in this house.
I've got these flowers. I've got a coffee plant that has survived now for 4 years, 4.5, as well as a Swedish ivy that was propagated from the Swedish ivy in the White House.
Which White House, Jamie?
So the Swedish ivy was originally gifted to the Truman administration. It has been there continuously. And the cuttings were taken during the Obama administration.
Okay, good. Well, I guess Melania went and basically killed all the plants at some point, right? She murdered the rose garden.
My understanding is that this Swedish ivy still exists in the Biden White House.
All right, so you've got some Obama ivy there. That's very good for you. All right. So moving on from flowers. You detect white flowers. I detect no flowers.
So next thing is oak. Do you detect oak indicators? Anything toasty? Anything baking spiced? Any sort of like general like richness, toastiness of flavor or of aroma?
I detect no toastiness, but there is something in the ballpark of like vanilla. Maybe a scotch of vanilla, like vanilla extract. Am I detecting that? I feel like maybe I am.
I don't get vanilla.
Maybe it's because your sinuses are fucked up, Jamie.
It's possible. I also know that this wine does not see any oak, which is, not helpful because we're trying to blind taste. But I don't get any vanilla. I don't get any toastiness. I think maybe if I'm going to attribute that warmth of aroma to anything, it would be the herbalness that we were talking about, or the tropical flavors of the fruit. You, at this point, if you were detecting vanilla, might say aloud, possible small percentage of new oak will confirm on the palate.
I would say that.
I would say no evidence of new oak. I think this is stainless steel fermented. Yeah, one of the things is to note the vessel that it was fermented in.
And so you determine that there is neither new oak nor old oak, and therefore it must be stainless steel.
Correct.
Because there are no other vessels that we do this in.
I mean, there's cement and there's amphora, but this is one of the things that I think the CMS curriculum lacks in, which is a lack of coverage of those methods, because they can be very difficult to blind taste. Cement can be very difficult to distinguish from old oak, and amphora I don't think has the cachet on the high end of wine production for it to really catch the eyes of the people who make this exam. So amphora really isn't even considered.
All right. Well, Jamie, I think I'm gonna be able to close this in 4 minutes or 10 seconds per the requirement. It's definitely not been 20 minutes so far. But
we haven't even gotten to palate.
I'm racing to the finish line here, so let's pick up the pace.
All right, palate. Give it a good taste.
Whoa. Whoo. There's a lot of sugar on this one. All right, take me through it from top down.
First thing for me, and some people will save an assessment of sugar until they go through the rest of the structure. But for me, the first thing is this a dry wine or is it not a dry wine?
This is a wet wine.
This wine is wet.
Sweet.
I would call this wine off dry. This isn't like sweet or syrupy sweet.
You would say it's off dry. So off dry is in the middle, right?
Yeah.
Bone dry, dry, off dry, sweet, very sweet.
Yep.
I think it's a little telling that the scale has 3 variations of dry and only 2 variations of sweet. We need something in the middle, something more neutral. We need the Switzerland of the dry, wet scale.
I mean, for me, it's off dry. And this wine doesn't, it's not a dessert wine. I'm not going to pair this with lemon meringue pie, for example, because the pie is much, much sweeter than this wine is. But it's, it definitely makes you aware that there is sugar.
Yeah.
So Scott might say that this wine is sweet. I would definitely say that it is off dry.
I wouldn't say it's mega sweet or extremely sweet, but yes, I detect sweetness.
Definitely.
All right.
So next, fruit. And you're going through the same things that you went through on the nose. Do you detect the same fruits? Are they in the same condition?
Palate confirms nose on the presence of pineapple.
Definitely. Even the texture of pineapple.
Yeah. Well, because it's that sweetness. Does sweetness correlate to a textural component?
Sometimes.
Because you say there's no syrup, but there is. I mean, I guess that's the illusion, and I'm getting ahead of myself or of the rubric. But the sweetness of this, the pineapple flavor, and the level of body.
Yep.
Is
and
reminding me
definitely
of a pineapple
body.
syrup. Yeah. So sweetness does affect body.
Yeah.
Okay.
So you get pineapple. Is it in the same condition that you detected it on the nose? Is it still a fresh pineapple, or, as you say, is it pineapple in syrup?
It feels more like pineapple and syrup on palate.
Okay. What about the other tropical fruits?
I did not name any other tropical fruits.
You didn't, but you said
I had a vaguely tropical note, and there is a vague tropicality to the palate of this wine.
What about the apple note? Are you still getting it?
I was never getting it. You were getting it. I am getting it on palate.
Cool.
Palate confirms your nose apple presence.
Do you get any other fruit that you weren't detecting on the nose?
There's a little bit more citrus. There's like some fresh lemon juice, citrus. There's,
for the listener, I'm nodding along. I very much agree.
Yeah, pineapple's still dominant, and then lemon, and then that scotch of apple in there as well. Yes.
Okay.
Palate approves.
The apple, what condition? Is it a tart apple? Is it like a ripe,
tart.
Overripe?
It is ripe. Okay. It is a ripe apple.
Ripe apple.
Yes.
Okay. Cool. I would agree with you that there is pineapple big time on the palate here. I would disagree that it's the pineapple in syrup. I think it continues to be like a fresh pineapple. And I think the apple remains tart, and I very much agree that there is like a strong lemon juice component on the palate. Next up, oh my God, I just fully brain frizzled.
Do you not have the rubric in front of you? Are you doing this blind?
I'm doing this blind.
No, but you can do a blind tasting without being blind on the rubric. Have the rubric in front of you, and then you don't have to remember things.
Right, but it's better to like the exercise of continuing to do the rubric without help, so that Jamie, I keep it fresh.
Jamie, I need you to reorient your priorities, okay? This podcast is not studying for your exam. All right? Podcast first, then exam, then the Tim Tams and the other things that are important to you.
Okay, next thing is earthiness and minerality. Any on the palate?
No earthiness on palate. I don't think any minerality either.
I still get that dusty limestone, but I do agree that it's diminished on the palate.
I think the body and the off dryness is masking any type of minerality, for me at least.
What about the floral / herbal component that we mentioned?
I was just listening to myself make bubbles in the microphone, and I wasn't even. No, I don't eat a lot of flowers, as we've discussed, so I cannot confirm the florality on palate. And herbal notes, no, not palate does not confirm nose on herbal notes.
Yeah, I think the herbal component is very much diminished, and I still get the white flower thing, but it's very much in the background. Do you get the vanilla that you were talking about on the nose?
No, not at all.
Okay, so at this point we would say we don't think that there is any new oak on this wine. We don't think there's any old oak on this wine. There's no like oxidation going on here. We don't get any kind of nuttiness. Is there anything on the palate that you detect that we didn't say on the nose, or that we haven't said yet?
No.
Okay. So next is moving on to structure. The structure of the wine is sweetness, acidity, body, alcohol, tannin. So sweetness we've already assessed. You say sweet, I say off dry.
Yes.
Acidity?
Medium or medium minus acidity?
I would try that again.
I'm not salivating very much. Do you feel that this is a high acidity thing?
I literally just drooled.
Well, Jamie, you drool all the time.
Right.
You have no manners. Your tongue drags out of your mouth wherever you go.
Like Stimpy.
You got a little spit rag that you just have to keep tucked into your shirt, and you can just always catch the little dribbles.
Yeah, because I got to be polite.
Okay. Hang on. Let me try one more time here. All right. I guess I'm salivating. Do you believe that it is a high acidity?
I would say that this is extremely high.
Wow.
This is searingly high acid.
But but all right. So what is offsetting the presence of acid for me? Because I can be very sensitive. It's the sugar.
Remember the lemonade effect.
Right.
If something is too sweet, you add acid to decrease the sensation of sweetness. And if something is too acidic, yeah, you add sugar to decrease the sensation of acidity.
Jamie, it seems like this is kind of hard because if they're adding sugar to decrease the sensation of acidity, then how am I supposed to accurately detect the acidity?
Well, they're not adding it. It's just intrinsic to the production of the wine.
Okay, but they're in balance with each other.
As someone testing, as someone blind tasting, you have to learn to separate those sensations. The sensation of detecting sweetness from the sensation of detecting acidity.
This seems like a lot of work just to drink a glass of wine.
We're not drinking, we're tasting.
All right, you might be tasting. I'm drinking. In fact, I have drunk. My glass is empty now.
A whole glass, yes.
I ain't seen you spitting back out.
Yeah, I'm not spitting. I'm also drinking.
Yeah. All right, so high acidity. What else?
Yes. High acidity. Body.
Full body.
I would say
maybe the sugar is throwing me, but it feels very body-ish.
Sugar for sure is part of it, but I would call this medium body. It's not like Chardonnay or Viognier, where it's just like really glycerin and that feeling of drinking whole milk as opposed to skim milk. This is maybe 2% milk on that scale.
I do like 2% milk.
Same.
It's my preferred milk.
I mean, if I could, in fact, drink milk, it would be 2%. But I get the usle upipes when I drink milk.
Jamie, I'll give you $100 if you find a way to bring that up in your master exam. If you in your tasting exam happen to mention that you get loose stools from drinking milk, I'll believe you if you tell me that you did it. You're on the honor system.
Okay. I'll see if I can work that in there.
$200 if you actually say usle upipes and hope that none of your master som proctors speak pig Latin.
The thing is, there are a small handful of MSs that I could get away with that around, but all of them have to recuse themselves from examining me because they're friends of mine.
Well, that's fair.
Yeah.
That seems appropriate.
It would be like if you were an examiner for me, you could not possibly be an unbiased examiner of me.
No, I would fucking judge you very harshly.
Immediately. You would be like, just leave. We're done here.
Well, I mean, if I disagreed with you about the body level, which I do, but okay, fine. You're the expert. So what's next? Is next on the structural spectrum?
Would be tannin if this was a red wine, but it's a moment for us to note if there is any phenolic bitterness.
I detect none whatsoever.
Correct. Same here. So the next is initial conclusion. We go through a list of possible varieties and regions.
Wait, do we not assess alcohol? Do we not try to?
Oh, alcohol. Sorry. Good catch. Good catch.
I got you. You should bring me along when you go to take the exam. I'll just hang out behind you and be like, Jamie, you forgot alcohol. And then I would be asked to leave the room and
yes, you
the
would.
state.
So alcohol, what do you think?
I mean, I'm a big fan. I'm a little concerned that it's bad for my body. And culturally, maybe it's not a good thing for us either.
That's just wrong.
This is not giving me any palate indicators of a lot of alcohol. I am feeling pretty buzzed, but I also had a light breakfast 5 hours ago, and just put back a glass relatively quickly.
Right.
But I would say not high alcohol.
Yeah, I would
somewhere
agree.
in the single digit range.
Yep.
Yeah,
I would call this low. You know, to hedge my bets in a tasting scenario, I might say medium minus, just because maybe it's being masked by the sugar. But this is in fact low. This is a 9% alcohol wine.
I was gonna say a 9 or a 9.5. Jamie, I think I'm an adept at this. I think I'm just like I have natural talent.
You have learned a thing.
I don't know why that doesn't make me feel as good as if you said I was just naturally gifted at this. The fact that I learned and worked at it, which I guess I demonstrably have, doesn't feel as good as if it was just a God-given ability of mine. And that doesn't feel like me very much, but well, that's just my reaction.
I think that you should maybe go over that with a therapist someday.
Fucking God, I'm going to make a bingo card that I'm going to check off every episode. And one of them will be Jamie suggests that Scott gets therapy. And another will be Scott makes a joke about Jamie being illiterate.
Should Scott get therapy?
Fuck you. You are not putting that. Oh, well, everyone knows you're illiterate, but no, we're not putting that on Instagram.
Okay. So next thing is, do we think this is, and this is, we're hitting on a thing that I have a big issue with. The first question you answer in the initial conclusion is this an old world or a new world wine?
Jamie, why do you have issue with that? That doesn't seem an issue-based thing at all.
Don't fucking play dumb. I know you know better.
Is this an old world or a new world? Well,
so for the purposes of engaging with the exam,
yes.
Generally speaking, new world wines tend to be riper, tend to be more fruit-driven, tend to be higher in alcohol, lower in minerality. A big indicator for me is the change in fruit perception from the nose to the palate. If I'm smelling riper fruit on the nose, and then there's tartness that comes in on the palate, that is an indicator of an old world wine, whereas the reverse, if it's tart on the nose and gets much riper on the palate, that's a new world wine.
So this is new world then.
There are some things that would lead us there. You're correct.
Because of the presence of like apple and the apple smell being stronger than the apple flavor, that may be an indicator. And also that the fruit is tasting, to me at least, riper and sweeter than it smelled.
But the other thing that you said, and is very telling, is lemon and fresh lemon juice that was on the palate but not on the nose. That amount of tartness. And we're going to, the reason for this is, because we're not tasting blind, we can say this wine is vintage 2020, which was a very hot year sort of in all of Europe. And that heat will imitate wines from the New World in a lot of ways. But the way to tell here is that like lemon juice component that really makes the palate much tartar than the nose appears. I might get tricked if I was actually blind tasting this wine and say, I think this is a New World wine. Another indicator is there aren't very many testable white wines from the New World that have residual sugar. So if I'm detecting sugar in a wine, my world is very small. I'm only thinking about a small handful of varietals, and I'm mostly thinking about Europe.
Because you're detecting sugar.
Yeah, so the testable wines that have residual sugar are basically limited to Vouvray, Chenin Blanc from the Loire Valley, or Riesling from Germany. With some small exceptions like Pinot Gris or Gewürztraminer from Alsace, but neither of those has this searing acidity.
Jamie, I feel like you're teeing something up here, possibly about the problematic nature of CMS only testing you on certain varietals and certain bottling.
So yes, I am teeing it up, but it's also not a thing that I have a conclusion on necessarily, because it is it's helpful to have a small world in which to test. I'm not worried about this wine being Prokupats from Slovenia. I'm not worried about this wine being Chenin Blanc from the central coast of California. I'm not worried about this wine being Viognier from Virginia. I sort of can really dial it in, and it allows, for sure, a younger somm to understand their palate in a deep and meaningful way. So I have found it valuable. I'm not sure that it's the best way at the highest level. I don't have a solution for this particular problem. So, I'm loath to say like this is a problem. For sure, if I'm in a testing situation and I detect residual sugar, I feel some amount of relief. Okay, this is a wine with sugar. Now let's talk. Is this Chenin? Is this Riesling?
But they are testing you on things from around the globe, right?
Yes.
You're not just getting tested, but it's a narrow enough subset that you can say sugar equals Europe.
Yep.
Even though I'm assuming here, I'm not even assuming, I'm stating flat out, I know this from plenty of empirical experience, that wines from around the world also sometimes have sugar.
That is correct.
All right. So how did I do in, let's see, 6 hours? Did I win?
Scotty, we're not done. We're not done yet.
No, but we have to be done.
We did New World, Old World.
Oh, but we didn't narrow it down to continental.
So the next thing is possible grape varieties. You would say, I think that this is, if I was blind tasting this, I would say I think this is an Old World wine coming from a cool climate. The climate being that acid. That really searing acidity. I'm assuming that this is coming from a cool climate. And I would say possible varieties include Chenin Blanc from France, Riesling from Germany, in a, 2 to 4 year age range, but just based upon tasting. And then I would move on. Okay, final conclusion. I believe this to be Riesling from Germany I would have to be tasting it would have to be a great tasting day for me to get to Nahe, which is one of the lesser tested regions of Germany. I would probably say Mosel, because that's much more common. This is a Riesling from the Mosel, cabinet level, 2020 warm vintage, from a quality producer.
Well, you did it. You won. You get 5, I forget what they're called, tokens. You can
5 tokens.
5 tokens at the Chuck E. Cheese arcade.
So Scotty, do you like this wine?
That's not part of the rubric, right? They don't care if you like it. They just need to know that you can identify it.
Correct.
This is literally assessing your taste, but not your taste.
Yes.
Yes, your mechanism, but not
your opinions.
I do kind of appreciate that. At least there's no value judgments in it.
Right.
Except for the implicit value judgments of the wines and regions that are heavily selected for testing purposes.
Correct.
Yeah, I like it. I like it a lot. I like the fruit. I like the sugar. I'm enjoying the body. I do enjoy the ones that have a little bit of extra viscosity. I'm super down with this one. Maybe like a scotch less sweet. So somewhere between dry and off dry, which feels stupid for me to say.
That's not stupid. Very frequently I'll say, I'm detecting residual sugar. I would not call this off dry.
Sure. But I'm saying that I don't agree with the terminology, and that since I'm detecting sugar, it off dry makes it seem like there's no sugar at all. This is not a scotch off of dry for me. This is sweet minus. Sweet minus is what I'm saying.
Sweet minus. I'll bring that to the board.
You tell them. You tell them all about it and let them know that I have other thoughts that I would like them to consider.
I think there's extra sugar in this wine, partly because of the very hot vintage that was 2020.
Because heat makes more sugar.
Uh-huh.
Because the stuff ripens faster.
Correct.
And produces more sugar.
Yep.
Yeah.
And then this wasn't fermented dry. It was only fermented to 9% alcohol. So, you're left with a little bit of extra sugar. It comes from limestone soil in the Nahe, so it has that very high acid backbone to it. which I think allows it to be really balanced. And I really enjoy this wine, but I do agree, like, a cooler vintage of this wine, slightly less sugar, slightly less ripe, might be more my wheelhouse.
Yeah, it's Nums. What else do we have? Do we have other things to say about this wine? There can't be anything else to say about it. We've gone through the rubric.
There's a ton to say about the producer. Donnhoff is an incredible producer, currently run by Cornelius Donnhoff, who inherited it from his father, Helmut. They're maybe the best producer in the Nahe, which is one of the more off the beaten path regions of Germany. You know, you've got the Mosel, which is the premier Riesling producing region, and then the Rheingau and the Rheinhessen. The Rheinhessen being what formerly was bulk wine, the home of Black Cat and Blue Nun, and then Nahe and Pfalz, which largely aren't necessarily ignored, but aren't thought of as often. And Nahe is just like a little bit cooler, different soils. It's not on slate. And the river, the tributary of the Rhine that runs through it, the Nahe River, is a little bit smaller. So the moderation of climate is a little bit less. You know, I've been enamored of this producer since I first tasted them in probably 2015. And I think that this is a great example of them making a great wine, in even a very hot vintage.
Now, is this something that you could be tested on? This bottle?
Yes.
Okay. Do you think you're jinxing yourself by spending 45 minutes talking about it on the show today?
I don't know that I believe in jinxing.
Jamie, you believe in horoscopes. You believe in jinxing, okay?
I don't believe in horoscopes. I just like to entertain the idea because it's fun.
Okay. I think if you accept one dumb superstition, then it's okay for me to lump all of them in together.
Sure. Fine.
Great.
We could do a minute on, like, reading German labels because that's annoying.
I was going to ask, what is the cabinet? This is, I'm assuming, not a piece of furniture that the wine bottles are stored in.
So that is actually where the name comes from, originally.
From a cabinet?
From a cabinet, yes.
Okay, cool. Not a coincidence. Great. But what is the cabinet?
Cabinet is the level of ripeness at which the grapes are picked. So there is, and that is dependent on a scale called Oschel, degrees Oschel. I know you're looking very scared right now, and we're not going to go all the way in on what the scale is. We're just going to say cabinet is about ripeness. It's not necessarily about sugar, although it is correlated with sugar. So there can be a cabinet trocken meaning dry, in which the grapes were picked at the cabinet level of ripeness, but then fermented entirely dry. Does that make some amount of sense?
I think so.
So cabinet is the lowest level of ripeness, followed by Spätlese, and then Auslese, and then Beerenauslese, and then Trockenbeerenauslese. Trockenbeerenauslese, you'll note the use of the word trocken doesn't mean the wine is dry, means the berries are dried. It is the raisinated berries at the very end of the season.
Why would you think I would have noted anything about the use of the word trocken?
It registered on your face that I said something that you recognized.
Auslese and Beerenauslese seemed familiar. Trocken, I have not heard or retained, at least before.
I just said trocken like 2 minutes ago.
Well,
I thought maybe you had made the connection. Clearly, I was wrong. My apologies.
No. No.
So that's the scale at which you pick the berries. So you have Riesling Kabinett or Riesling Spätlese or Riesling Auslese and on up the scale. Above that on this label, you'll see it says Neiderhauser Klamm.
Neiderhauser Klamm. Yes.
So anytime you see ER, that means that suffix is essentially where a thing is from or when a thing is from. Many German wine labels will say, you'll see the vintage 2020 and it'll say ER, like 2020er, which sounds better if you say it in German, but I don't know how to. That means it's from 2020. So the ER suffix here means that it is from the town of Niederhaus. It is a Niederhauser. That's why the famous Ich bin ein Berliner, like he thought he was saying he's a guy from Berlin, because generally you would append ER to a place to say that you're from that place.
But what was he actually saying?
A donut. I'm a donut.
Because Berliner is a German word for donut.
Right.
So his heart was in the right place, Jamie, all right?
His head was even in the right place.
But not his speechwriters.
Not all the way in the right place.
All right. I understand the adding of the suffix ER to Niederhaus to indicate that it's from there.
Uh-huh.
Although I guess just putting the name of a place on a label would tell me that also. But adding the suffix to a year, why else would it say 20? Well, it doesn't say 2020 on here. That's
on
just
some German bottles it does. Because that's the way Germans denote a vintage.
I don't understand, but also I don't need to.
A different language, man.
And I don't need to understand.
Right. I just wanted to note it because sometimes you will see that. And for our listening audience, if you see 2020 or 2016 that's just a wine from that. That's the vintage.
Now, what about Klamm? Klamm. What is Klamm?
Klamm. Klamm is the specific vineyard that it comes from. So this is in the town of Niederhaus. There is a vineyard called Klamm, and all of the grapes that went into this bottle came from Klamm.
The vineyard is called Klamm. The town is called Niederhaus. The producer is Donnhoff.
Yep.
The grape is Riesling. The ripeness picking time frame is Kabinett. And the year is 2020.
Correct.
Great. I read a label.
We've got a German wine label. They are difficult. It is sometimes very annoying because sometimes these words don't appear in the sequence that you think that they should. And sometimes it's quite difficult to parse producer from vineyard or town. But that's generally the way. And it's easy. The ER suffix can be an indicator for sure of the town, but then also the word after that is usually going to be the vineyard. And then any other unrecognized noun on the label will be the producer.
The producer. But usually that's also going to be the big word on the label, right? The producer's name is usually the biggest word.
Well, not always. And less frequently on European wine labels than on any other wine labels. If you look at, for example, a Burgundy wine label, the biggest thing on those labels is almost always the appellation. Burgundy, Montrachet, Premier Cru, or Saint-Aubin, or Gevrey-Chambertin, or Bourgogne Rouge, or whatever. And then the producer name is much, much smaller. Sometimes that happens with German labels and Austrian labels and Spanish labels as well.
All right.
So that's Donnhoff.
Donnhoff.
I really like this wine. It's stimulating.
It is stimulating. It's likable. It's the first wine that I've liked in at least 5 bottles of wine. Because I didn't like anything you picked for the last miniseries.
It's insane that you didn't like any of those bottles.
Well,
absolute insanity.
One of them was just like
one of them was fucked.
Grenadine, and one of them was fucked, and the other 2 tasted bad. Like, that makes perfect sense to me. It's completely logical that I wouldn't like things that are too sweet, that are fucked, or that taste bad.
I am going to withhold my comments. Because I want to talk about a trip to the moon.
Ah, oui, a trip to the moon. Le voyage dans
la
lune.
La lune.
Not
la luna. Le voyage dans la lune.
I don't have the original French title in front of me.
You didn't fucking remember it from when you watched it? Come on, Scott.
Because I looked at the words that were in the language that I speak and read, and that's what I retained.
Ignorant American bullshit.
Wow. This is some real kind of offensively Lydia Tarr style didacticism here, okay? Hey, you know it was nice? The estate of so good. The estate of Leonard Bernstein sent a letter to, I think, the New Yorker to correct the record because there's been so much discussion in the wake of Tarr's release and in questions about what Lydia is lying about and what parts of her origin story are true, including writer-director Todd Field saying that there was no way she could possibly have studied under Bernstein, and the Bernstein estate wrote this like letter to the editor for their like letters column saying, we need to correct the record here. Lydia was one of Lenny's favorite students, and she studied with him when she was 17, just a year before he passed away.
That's so good. Oh
Everybody's
my God.
getting in.
That's so fucking funny.
It's great that like in the fiction of the movie, she's canceled and no one wants to be any part of her. But in the reality of our world, everybody loves Lydia Tarr except for fucking Jamie.
She's bad. I stand alone here. Linda is bad.
No, you don't stand alone, Jamie. You just stand over there on your little Jamie Island. Anyway, we're talking about a trip to the moon. There's not even a synopsis to give. It's a trip to the moon. It's from 1902. It's the like first ever science fiction film. At the time of its release, it was one of the longest films that had seen a wide release at 15 minutes long. It has a more involved narratives than was expected of features at the time. There weren't even features. There were just shorts. It was incredibly popular. It ran seemingly nonstop for months in Paris, and it was a huge hit across the globe. It was so fucking popular that it played in cities across the U.S. for weeks and months, but Méliès didn't see a dime of any of that because motherfuckers like Edison pirated copies of it and just ran their own prints and totally screwed him over. Boy, a lot of high hypocrisy from fucking Edison. Yep. Mr. I'm Thomas Edison. Everybody's got to pay me patents for motion picture cameras that I didn't invent. I just patented them first. Edison.
Well-known hypocrite and asshole, Thomas Edison.
Thomas Edison, go fuck yourself.
Yeah. Just like standard operating procedure for capitalists in society.
Yeah, they got to get theirs, but they don't mind taking from everybody else.
Correct.
It's a trip to the moon. It's one of the most famous movies ever made. If you're watching our video, you can see my little background. It has like one of the most iconic images in all of cinema, that of the moon with the face with the rocket ship that has crash landed into it. And it is a very simple and weird kind of dreamlike sci-fi fantasy story about a bunch of astronomers who may also be wizards who fire themselves in a little like capsule out of a cannon, crash land on the moon, meet some like crazy moon people. They kill them with umbrellas and those moon people explode into powder and pyrotechnics. And then they escape and blessedly gravity pulls them right back to Earth. They don't take him hostage.
Oh,
he's a stowaway.
He's a prisoner.
He's a prisoner, but then he stows away on their ship to get back home.
He stows away on their ship?
They are surprised when he is back on Earth. Spoilers for a
15-minute feature. No, I thought that he was fully like bound when he appears on Earth.
No, he like shows up and is like goofing off and having a great time and everybody's surprised by his presence. I don't know. Let's just watch it again and then we'll confirm. It's 15 minutes long.
It's 15 minutes.
It's wonderful.
I could swear that like they brought him home to whatever. Of course, my reading of the narrative was a bunch of white people go and disrupt a native society's, thing wherever they go. They start killing people and then they take one prisoner to bring back as a trophy.
Now, for the listening audience, there's no way for you to know, but you're just going to have to believe me here. I'm opening an envelope right now that I sealed before we began the recording, and I'm drawing out a piece of paper that says, Jamie gets mad about the movie being an imperialist narrative.
I mean,
folding it back up.
Am I wrong? Am I wrong?
No, I mean, you're describing the events that happen.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't think the movie is pro-lunar imperialism and colonization.
I don't know about that.
Of course. Oh my God.
It's an imperialist narrative.
It is.
And the position it takes is like, these guys are really cool.
Is that the position that it takes?
Do you think that it just doesn't take a position? Because it certainly doesn't take the position that they're villains. They arrive and they just start killing people. They're bad.
All right, so I'm bad, and I'm doing this from the Wikipedia page for the film, which does seem to be fairly well researched, but film scholar Matthew Solomon notes that the last part of the film, the parade and commemoration sequence that is missing in some prints of the few that are available, is especially forceful in this anti-imperialist regard. He argues that Méliès, who had previously worked as an anti-boulangist political cartoonist, mocks imperialist domination in the film by presenting his colonial conquerors as bumbling pedants who mercilessly attack alien life forms they meet and return with a mistreated captive amid fanfares of self-congratulation.
I could get that is his intent, but my guess is that it came across to wider audiences in another way.
The film scholar Elizabeth Ezra agrees that Méliès mocks the pretensions of colonialist accounts of the conquest of one culture by another, and adds that his film also thematizes. I really want to say that as thematizes. That's not right. And adds that his film also thematizes social differentiation on the home front, as the hierarchical patterns on the moon are shown to bear a curious resemblance to those on Earth. I, not being a scholar of 19aughts French political satire and commentary, cannot personally weigh in either way.
Sure.
But I do not believe that the movie is in favor of the imperialist characters who are going there. They show up, they act a fool, they bumble around, they kill a bunch of guys aggressively for no reason, and while they come home and are rewarded, the movie itself infers no moral value on their actions.
That's fair.
I don't think. I think it is simply, for me personally, without the expertise of a scholar of that time, I feel it is just depicted, and you may take your own particular value from it. But I'm sure digging in a little bit deeper, we might find that you are wrong. Just a guess. Just a guess.
Rude. My assumption would be that global audiences took it the other way.
Well, you need to give global audiences the benefit of the doubt, Jamie. Anyway, I knew this was going to happen. I knew that the first thing you were going to talk about, fuck it, we got to cancel Georges Méliès because Georges Méliès made a movie about colonialism.
I said nothing about canceling Georges Méliès.
No, but you were getting all up on your high Jamie horse about it, and you were just going to miss the point of the whole thing, which was magic and wonder and wizardry. Aside from your Twitter hot takes, what did you think of A Trip to the Moon?
It's gorgeous, and it's a lot of fun to watch. And
it's lovely.
The trickery that they use, the aesthetic of it is so foreign to us now. You know, it looks like a dream. I don't have any idea how most of it was achieved. Even the beginning scene of them in the observatory, classroom, council room,
lecture hall of the Astronomers Wizard Hat Society.
Right. Like the way that the backgrounds are interacted with, I wasn't expecting him to write on the chalkboard because I thought that was a superimposed background.
No, man, this predates the idea of superimposed backgrounds by several decades. It's theater. It's all theater backdrops. They're just flat painted backdrops like you would have in a stage production.
They look great.
It looks amazing. Yeah.
Yeah. In fact, I really like the aesthetic enough that I would love to see a modern revival of that kind of look. And maybe there's an example that I'm not thinking of.
What is his name? He's a Canadian. The fuck is his name? Guy Maddin. You might want to check out the works of Guy Maddin. Who is a Canadian experimental filmmaker, and he goes out of his way to use antiquated or even archaic filmmaking techniques, including an aesthetic that looks hand-colored in the way that the version of the film that we watched is hand-colored, and in framing and actual cameras that he uses. He's probably best known for My Winnipeg, or the saddest music in the world. But But I guess the last one of his that I saw was The Forbidden Room. But yeah, his
frozen animals in the tundra. Jesus Christ.
Yeah. He's pretty wild. So if you're looking for like something that is in the ballpark of like a modern spin on this like Méliès aesthetic, then you might want to check out the Guy Maddens.
It's on Mubi.
Yeah, a lot of them are on the Mubi. Mubi's great. Great service.
Anyway, I really, really like the aesthetic and the coloration too. I found to be enchanting, and
it's all
beautiful.
hand colored too.
Yeah.
That the film was. I mean, this was back before there was like color film. But it was all black and white film stock. And then Méliès approved a series of hand-colored prints and production runs that were made of it. It's speculated that this particular print, so the one that's on HBOMax, is probably the most complete version of the film that exists today, because, bummer, most silent films don't exist anymore. Like Méliès made 500 movies in his lifetime. He made a couple dozen a year. And most of them were very short. Like he was making things similar to what the Lumiere brothers, who were kind of like they didn't invent motion picture cameras. They invented motion picture cameras concurrent with a few other people who were making like that innovation at the time. But their filming and then exhibition, like their projection of it, is like their major landmark. And they're most famous for a series of 1-minute documentaries they made called Actualités. And they just like plunk the camera down. I think the first one they made is called Workers Leaving a Warehouse. And it was the people at the Lumiere warehouse and they're just leaving. And the camera rolls. And you can watch all of these on YouTube. And some of them have been heinously upscaled to 4K at like 60 frames a second through AI learning. And it's kind of monstrous for my eyes to watch. But so Méliès was doing very similar things to that. He was one of the early pioneers in not just recording 60 or 90 second documentaries, but actually putting a little bit of narrative into it. He invented his own camera essentially when the Lumieres refused to sell him a projector. He bought somebody else's camera that was being developed at the same time and reverse engineered it and turned it into a projector. But yeah, and then to get film, he ended up buying his own unperforated film and had to like engineer his own film production and development and processing methodology. Genuinely a genius. But yeah, and then the coloration was all done by hand. Most of those prints were lost. A lot of Méliès' prints were taken away and melted down to get the silver nitrate extracted out of it to help pay for the war effort during World War I. And then sometime in the 1920s, after he'd retired and was like, you know, God knows what his reasoning was, but I'm sure in a borderline drunken fit of pique, Méliès burned like hundreds of his prints of his own movies. This film was basically thought lost for decades. And then this print that we have watched, the one that's on HBOMax, appeared in 1993 and was like anonymously donated from a private collection. And then by 99, it was traded to a film preservationist company, and using digital like scanning and film improvement and visual effects technologies that had suddenly like blossomed in those years. They were able to actually begin the restoration process in, I want to say the aughts, and it was done and the film premiered at the Cannes Film Festival in 2011, like 109 years after its initial production. And it was like $1 million restoration project because the print that they found, while it was complete, was also very damaged and deteriorated. And this is like one of a handful of Méliès' works that still exists and is remembered.
Were other titles of his, like, is there knowledge of other titles of his that were comparably popular that don't exist anymore?
I don't know. He never had anything that was as popular as this. So this movie is loosely based on some of Méliès' favorite Jules Verne stories, like From the Earth to the Moon and Around the Moon. It's taken from, but Méliès also made a film. What is it? The Fantastic Voyage, I think, which is explicitly based on a Jules Verne story. And that one was similar in its use of like science fiction and fantasy and incredible effects here. He started out as a magician, like as a stage magician and illusionist.
Well, that makes some amount of sense given what we see on screen.
It makes a lot of sense. Yeah.
The poofs of smoke and the I mean, really, the poofs of smoke are the big thing, right?
Well, it's not just the poofs of smoke, because his big thing was not just bringing stage illusions to the screen, which was huge, but in merging stage illusions with the other magic tool of filmmaking, which is the cut, the edit. Because those poofs of smoke happen, right? Like one of the astronomers, the imperialist astronomers that Jamie hates so much, he whacks one of those little moon guys with his umbrella, and there's a puff of smoke, and the moon guy is gone.
Yep.
Méliès was one of like the major innovators and popularizers of what's called the substitution splice, which is like the simplest effect in the world. You have an action where somebody is running across the screen, and then the camera operator stops the camera, and then that person steps off frame. Everybody else stays in the same place. The camera doesn't move. The framing, the background, everything else is in the same position, and you start rolling again, and now that person's gone. So he combines that type of substitution splice with pyrotechnic effects that he would use in his stage shows, and boom, you have a very compelling illusion of somebody getting hit with an umbrella and exploding and disappearing. He was genuinely brilliant, and only like decades later was really appreciated in his time. How would you, because you're talking about the aesthetic and you'd like to see a revival of it, how would you describe the perspective of the film? And I don't mean the thematic perspective. I mean the perspective of the camera and therefore the audience.
The perspective. It is, I don't know that I have the vocabulary to describe it. Yeah. It's all in medium shot.
They're all wide shots, what we would call a master shot now. Yeah.
Sure.
This was before the invention of coverage, essentially, of Hollywood style invisible editing, where you do your master and then you push him for the medium and then the close-up.
Right. And the camera is always, as you might say, on sticks.
Yes, it is on a tripod. That's correct. It doesn't move ever.
And visually, every image kind of looks like a painting. It's very flat.
It's very flat. It's very painterly. His big innovation in, like, as a major formal change that ended up being something that continued throughout much of the silent era was the proscenium staging. Méliès, coming from theater, like he turned his theater where he would do all of his stage shows and his stage magician shows into a film studio. But he was the first one to really put the camera in a position that would replicate the feeling of being an audience member for a live theatrical production.
Huh.
So you always have the exact same perspective. The framing is essentially like looking at the center of a stage show. You're neither above nor like below the eye line. It's like you have the best seat in the house at a small theater, and you're looking straight on at the center of the camera. And it took decades before anybody in Western film started moving away from that. But yeah, he was the first one who did that. He invented all of the special effects that you're seeing.
What was done before that, perspective-wise?
I mean, but before that, it was like before Méliès and a few of his contemporaries, nobody was doing narratives. Like when he started distributing this movie and tried to get other exhibitors to show it, they were like, 15 minutes, that's too long. Nobody's going to sit through that. And he had to do one. He basically like told one of the exhibitors in France, he was like, fine, I'll give you, like, you don't want to pay what I want to charge you for the film. Fine. I'll let you show it for one night for free. And we'll see what the audience response is. And the guy shows it for one night for free. And the thing played on a loop forever. And I think it was like a carnival or a fair or something. So like before this movie and other films from Méliès and his contemporaries, like people weren't doing long narrative films. They were like the actualités. It was, you would go and watch workers leaving a train, or workers leaving a factory, or you would watch a train coming into the station is one of the other like very, very, very famous ones. It was not about narrative. It was just a spectacle. It was a show. It was look at this new technical wonder that we've come up with.
Right.
You can see people walking around, and maybe there'd be like in a 60-second film, there'd be like a sight gag. Or Méliès in his earlier films, before he worked up to things as long as A Trip to the Moon, would just basically film gags from his stage show and his magician's trickery. But yeah, like there wasn't a form at that point. Like this is only 7 years after the first like public exhibition of cinema had happened. And in the first 7 years, and this motherfucker comes out and makes a science fiction fantasy adventure movie where they go to the moon and meet alien creatures and then make a return journey.
Just by falling, which I love.
Yeah.
And I also love that they fell into the ocean like an Apollo capsule.
I mean, the man wasn't wrong about all of it. He was wrong that you couldn't escape Earth's gravity by getting into a cannon. He was wrong that being in a capsule fired out of a cannon wouldn't liquefy everyone inside.
He was wrong that there is no atmosphere on the moon.
Right. But like otherwise, he got some things right.
I like the cavern. The cavern with all the mushrooms.
The cavern with the mushrooms that grow.
What the fuck
Very
was
cool.
with the one guy planted his umbrella and it became a mushroom?
It's magic. It's magic dream logic.
I found it enchanting.
It is. It's completely enchanting, and
it is quite whimsical, Scott.
It is extremely whimsical. I thought you might enjoy it.
I really liked it. I was smiling the whole time, and I watched it twice through.
I think there's one more movie that we'll be watching this miniseries that will have whimsy in it, and the others will not have whimsy.
Well, that's a bummer. I want more whimsy, Scott.
But they'll have other things. Some of them will very much appeal to your political sensibilities.
Good.
Others very much not so.
I mean, it sounds like in his time, you know, I missed that this was meant to be a satire and just sort of came at it from the point of view of like, what impact must this have had to audiences?
Yeah.
And for sure, we don't know that. I'm sure we could do some research as to like what the zeitgeist was around this movie, but it certainly wouldn't have been the first, nor certainly was it the last satire that was taken the wrong way. Yeah.
Like my beloved Starship Troopers.
So I was about to mention Starship Troopers.
1997 Starship Troopers.
Fucking
reviled by so many critics for being a borderline fascist narrative. Like, congratulations, you were paying attention. Yeah. It's a trip to the moon. I don't have too much more to say about it, except that it's a trip to the moon. People should check it out. It's 15 minutes. It's an enormous part of film history. It's delightful and it's weird. And to just put a period on the end of the sentence about the near tragedy of Méliès' life. He retires and most of his films are lost, and he ends up. You can just watch the 2011 Martin Scorsese movie Hugo, which is based on a children's book, which is in part based on Méliès' actual life. Like in his 60s, he ended up just like working a small shop in a train station, selling toys and trinkets and, like little illusions. And it was only around 1929 that a French film society and some critics and some filmmakers were like, oh yeah, we need to reappreciate Méliès because he basically invented so much of the form. And they found a print of the film that didn't have the entire movie on it. Even at that point, they were already missing large sections of it because nobody thought to preserve this new art form that was coming out.
Right.
And also, they were like nitrate prints, so they were explosive. And yeah, he got like shown around. They did like a big show of all of his films. And then this film society basically like put him up in a rent-free apartment for the rest of his days. And he died in his 70s, not impoverished and tragically. So like it's a nice turnabout.
At the very least, yeah, he was recognized at the very end.
Yeah, an artist who was forgotten for 20 years is ultimately remembered and cherished. But yeah, and we'll as we go through, like, not that in 6 episodes we're gonna like trace the development of all types of filmmaking styles, but we're not gonna watch anything that's remotely like this ever again. Like Méliès was a groundbreaker for a lot of people. The influential and cinema language inventing and not at all problematic D.W. Griffith was a huge Méliès fan and said he gave us everything. Like Méliès invented so much of it. And Griffith is a guy who went on to like essentially invent contemporary Western narrative cinema grammar and invented action language. And also, made a fucking 3-hour epic that was how the Ku Klux Klan are the heroes of American history, which we will not be discussing, Jamie. I'm sure you were a little worried, but no, we're not going to be doing The Birth of a Nation.
He, I just Googled him. He has the look of an asshole about him. He looks like a douchebag.
Hang on. I need to look up what DW.
I've got a photo of him in what looks like a shipyard holding a cigarette, looking extremely smug.
Well, Jamie, that's not fair because people looked different back then, all right? It was the teens and the 20s and people, you know what he looks like? He looks a little bit like the actor who plays the Merovingian.
He does.
He's got a scotch of the Merv about him.
He's also got a comb over, which is not flattering.
Well, it was, give the man a break. Let's judge him. Let's not judge him, Jamie, for his physical attributes that he cannot control.
Well, we can judge him for making The Birth of a Nation for sure.
Yeah, but also many other great movies. But anyway, aside from Griffith, Méliès, very special, very important. Check this one out, and see other things as well.
Yeah, it was super good. It has my endorsement.
Indeed.
Let's talk about, obviously you made no attempt to pair this movie with this wine based on, but do you think it works?
Sure.
Do you think the wine works with the movie?
Yeah.
Yeah, I also am kind of in the, sure.
It kind of works out. It's got a little bit of sweetness, which matches to like the fun and the whimsy.
It's zippy. It has a feeling of like quickness to it. The movie moves very quickly.
Yeah.
I think it works weirdly.
It's fine. It's not a bad pairing. It's better than most of the Best Picture nominee pairings that you also did not attempt, I should point out.
Correct.
Yeah. Yeah, I like this one.
I really like this wine. It's very good. And I like this movie. I'm feeling very good about the experience here, having watched the movie and drunk the wine. All right, so next wine in our flight is the 2017 Domaine Huet Le Mont Demi-Sec Vouvray. That was a lot of French words, but it is for me possibly the global benchmark for what Chenin Blanc tastes like. This producer has a little bit of a special place in my heart, having drunk my birth vintage of it one year for my birthday. It's also a thing that I consistently revisit year over year, and they continue to make great wines. It is available at crushwineco.com for a very reasonable $39.95.
Jamie, this is not a reality television show. You do not need to take excessive pauses to drag out the drama and to fill in the runtime between car commercials, okay?
I was not doing that. I was getting the spreadsheet open.
All right, well, I finally just started watching a reality television show for the first time, and now I understand jokes about reality shows, and I want to make them as well.
This will be the most expensive wine of our flight.
At $37.99?
Sorry, $39.95.
Son of a bitch.
I told you earlier in the episode 37. I was wrong. $39. It's $40 Chenin Blanc. I told you that it was textured, focused, and young.
Well, and I took all of those pairing words and did nothing with them whatsoever. And instead, we move forward chronologically, following Jamie's education in the higher world of wine, and we will trace one of the next major innovators in the development of film language and film theory, and we will be watching Sergei Eisenstein's 1925 battleship Potemkin. This is a landmark bit of Russian propaganda, but also one of the most important films in the development of editing and intellectual montage, which is like a form of editing and a form of filmmaking that could have taken dominance in the entire globe had the popularity and dominance of Hollywood not actually smothered most other forms of cinema. Battleship Potemkin is available to stream on any of a number of the streaming services. You could watch it if you're subscribed to the HBOMax, the Criterion channel, if you have a library with a partnering membership to Canopy, and also it is in the public domain, so you could just watch it on YubTub as well. But so check that one out and then tune back in next time.
1 hour and 6 minutes.
Nope, longer than that.
According to Google.
Oh, Google is mistaken. But the thing about the early films is that the runtimes are all variable depending on what print you have, what speed that was intended to be run at, and what speed it actually ends up getting run at.
Well, that sounds annoying.
Yeah.
But also fair.
Yeah.
Well, everyone,
Jamie,
thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Jamie. Thank you for teaching me a little bit about this here wine.
And thank you for exposing me to 1902's awesome sci-fi imperialist propaganda. Scott is rolling his whole head, not just his eyes.
My whole head. I detached a retina. I pulled something in my neck.
Everyone, follow us on the socials at Bigger Bottle Pod. Please email us at biggerbottlepod@gmail.com if you have any questions or concerns, and also if you have an international review you'd like us to read on the show. Make sure you rate, review, and follow us wherever you get your podcasts, please.
Please and thank you. This episode was produced and edited by Scott Hudson. That's me. Our social media presence is the work of James Jimby Jammer Hammer Rammer Mubin. That's him.
That's me.
Our art is by Ross Connard. And thanks to Rebecca McCracken for helping out with project management and operations and the Tim Tams.
And the Tim Tams. Remember, everyone, drink more wine, watch more movies, and more Tim Tams. It's good for you, we promise.
Why you gotta tell them to watch more Tim Tams, Jamie? Everybody watches too many fucking Tim Tams. Except for me.
You don't watch any Tim Tams.
I've watched 3 Tim Tams.